I'm posting this on September 11th of 2021. This is a big day for some people. On this day in Afghanistan, the Taliban is back in power and inaugurating their new government. That government has already been dealing with and will be dealing with the current American administration, being led by somebody who claimed that white supremacy is supposedly one of, if not the biggest threat to the United States of America, and the white people who supposedly hold these white supremacist ideas that are hardly ever defined. This celebration that the Taliban is holding comes 13 days after the Americans used a drone to strike a target around the Kabul airport that they said posed a threat to what was going on at the airport, the ongoing evacuation of Afghans and Americans and other foreign citizens. That turned out, at least it's reported, that a few children lost their lives and a few other innocent people. Now, whether you agree with the reports or not, we've been assured that this posed a threat, and this was also in part retaliation for what had happened at the airport on the 27th, when there was a bombing that injured hundreds, maimed hundreds, and killed, I think, over 100 people, including 13 American soldiers. So on September 11th, 20 years ago, back in the United States of America, 5 of these people that recently died after someone decided to strap explosives to themselves, walk into a crowd of fellow human beings, and detonate those explosions. 5 years ago, in the United States of America, Marine Corps Lance Corporals David L. Espinoza of Rio Bravo, Texas, Riley J. McCullum of Jackson, Wyoming, Dylan R. Merola of Rancho Cucamonga, California, Kareem M. Nikoi of Norco, California, and Jared M. Schmitz were babies somewhere in the United States of America, be they born or unborn. And I say somewhere in America despite saying the locations they're from because that's the kind of place the United States of America is. You go around the place and you meet people from many other places. Even within the United States of America, in many locations, you're not actually going to find people who are from that place. Somebody says, oh, I'm from here, I'm from so-and-so, but they weren't born there. Might have not even been born in the United States of America. Like I personally was born in Paris, France, but on that same day, when these 5 were somewhere being babies or waiting to be born somewhere in the United States of America, I was in West Liberty, West Virginia. At that time, sometime during that day, I was walking into a classroom on West Liberty State College's campus, and the television was on. Something odd was on the television. People were kind of watching it. I think it was a history class. It was some class. I'm not really remembering exactly when it was. But I remember people were watching the television, and they weren't doing the classwork. The teacher was watching the television. Everyone was just transfixed, and I saw that one of the World Trade Centers was on fire. I was familiar with New York. I'd been to New York City before. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area. I watched TV. I was kind of aware these are iconic buildings. I think I recall remembering that, okay, was this some film of the previous bombing that happened when there was a terrorist attack? And but I was like, why is the smoke coming on the top? Like, what's happening? Why would the bombing that I remembered from the parking lot be showing smoke on the top? And we started actually discussing what was going on. And quickly found out that no, this apparently is live. This is live TV. Something's happened in New York City. A plane has flown into the building. A plane flew into the building. I think you literally think about it. A plane literally was flown into a skyscraper. That alone was just dumbfounding. And people, I could understand why people were just watching that. We're sitting there and we're talking, and people are just sharing ideas and, okay, what's going on with this thing? And we're hearing reports. And this is before the full 24/7 full-on internet kind of life that many of you hearing this live in. We're not having people constantly on Twitter or Facebook live streaming. So you're getting things from relatively limited sources. And we're out here in the hills of West Liberty, West Virginia, in the Panhandle area. And I'm sitting there just talking to fellow students and people. And I'd just gotten to the school there. I lived in Washington, D.C. area, Montgomery County, in a relatively international area, gone to this small town and was a bit concerned. I was on a partial football scholarship. I was majoring in graphic design. I was getting along with some people. I was worried from moving to where I'd left. I was worried that there was going to be racism in this kind of small town, this small area. I remember when I first moved to the United States of America, I had been watching certain film about, you'd get older films back in 94 when I first moved, when I was in Kenya, getting some older film of those cars with the wooden paneling. I remember some things with KKK. These are kind of images that stick out. It was a film with like a burning cross, and that's a very it's an image, it's a very vivid image that sticks in your mind. So that's the kind of worries that I had over the United States of America. I get to Bethesda, Maryland. It's the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It's one of the most well-off places in the United States of America. I'm going to one of the top public schools that I found. It was one of the top public schools. It still is one of the top public schools in the United States of America. International kids from different places. So a lot of people like me, coming from different places, living in the United States of America, trying to be part of what the United States of America is. So, okay, that's not there. The racism isn't there. But this is small town West Virginia. West Virginia, out in the hills. Like, yeah, we're going to... No, that wasn't there as well. I got there to West Virginia, got there to this small town, got there to this small school. I'm glad I actually went with one of my friends from school. He was a first generation Korean from South Korea, not North Korea. And we got there, and there was some cordial treatment in the dorms. Not just the football players, but other people. Some people I'm still really good friends with to this day. So I didn't experience anything overtly racist, but there were some racial things, some cultural things, just from lived experiences, from not knowing certain things. So I think some things based on ignorance. Like, for example, one of our good friends, after some time, the first month we were there, first couple of months we were there, came and asked my roommate, my teammate, my former classmate from high school, that, okay, how do you say this in Asian? Now, they didn't put two and two together that, okay, this person is from Korea, South Korea, so he speaks Korean and that's a different language in the kind of place. That's the kind of thing that was as far as the things that I saw. There are other things like preferences and things like cultural issues, communication. These are things that happen pretty much everywhere. But in general, most of the white people that I met, many of the white people that I met, just treated me cordially. And just out of their own lived experience, they just assumed, oh, this is just another American. That's how most of the people treated me. I'm still not a citizen, and I wasn't at that time, of course, I should go without saying. But they had certain expectations or certain things that they would just assume that an American would know, and some of those things I knew just from having lived in America and things like that. I just kind of accepted them and went along, and for some of the people, eventually they would find out that, oh, you actually weren't born here. One thing that was a bit surprising was the treatment that I got from some of the Black Americans. They, from their lived experiences, treated me as a Black person, even though I just happened to be born a Negro. Now, the school that I went to, the area that I lived in, you can go check it out right now in the recent kind of situations of people taking down a knee. It's been on TV a few times as one of the places where a bunch of people are just out there, a bunch of white people are out there taking a knee and saying, yes, we pledge our allegiance to the case of Black Lives Matter matters. Even back then, I didn't feel any racist behavior when I was in Bethesda, Maryland. But most of the Negro people that I knew, similar skin color that I had, were actually people who are first generation African Americans. Or similar to me, they were actually not even American citizens yet. They were just Africans. Their parents were working in international organizations, in the different kind of embassies, or those sorts of things, or were just married to somebody and just moved to the United States of America and happened to be living in that area. That was majority of the Negroes that I'd met. And this wasn't exclusive to the Negroes. This was also with the Caucasians. This was also with the Orientals, the Europeans. I was meeting a lot of people who were first generation or children of foreigners. And that's how it was in high school. And in high school, many of the people just assumed that I too was American. It wasn't a thing that was taken for granted. Some people were, some people weren't. It wasn't really mentioned that much or discussed too much in extent. There's some people I knew for the entire 4 years that I was in there who, when I graduated, they still thought I was an American. There's probably still people today who still think that I was, that I also met in college. And in college, both the white people, the Black people, and there was some Hispanic people, those are mostly multi-generational Americans when I got to West Virginia. And I got to know them, got to know more about who they were, United States of America, other places in the country that were a bit more similar to this kind of area. I remember some of the people inviting me to their homes and me thinking like, wow, this is kind of like the time when I was visiting the villages where my parents grew up in the countryside here in Kenya. And there's like the only difference really is that there's power lines and brick buildings instead of mud roads and no power lines and trees and this wild nature. But personality wise, I would almost say that on average, the average lifestyle of some white person growing in rural America is closer to what majority of the Africans kind of live like when they're in rural Africa, whereas you have majority of the black Americans live in urban cities and urban areas, which is very different from life for most actual Africans. And that's just something that I kind of realized. But just getting to talk to people, and that's how we'd get to know and understand what was happening that we're not directly experiencing ourselves. So now back to this classroom. We're sitting in there and we're talking and we're like, what is this live? Is it an accident? Is anything else happening? Some people are thinking, oh, this might have been an accident, but how does that happen as an accident? And for those people that were thinking that, they just thought it just was an accident. That thought was just shut down when we're just sitting there watching live, and that second plane just flies into the building, and you just see it slam right into it. And anyone who had that thought, I think anyone who had that thought, it just left their mind. And now you're just wondering what's going on. And I'm not quite sure if it was before that or after that, how long after that we left the classroom and started doing these things, where people started hearing the reports of, is this going to happen in West Virginia? Or we heard about the plane that was dropped in Pennsylvania. Or we heard that there was the thing in the Pentagon. And some people were worrying. I'm like, no, even if there is a situation, I wasn't that much into politics at that time, but even if there was some kind of situation, I was like, we're in West Virginia. We're in some small town. If there's going to be an attack, I doubt they're going to try and attack this small hill. But still, some people were worried. Some people were like, are they coming here? I'm like, I don't think, first of all, we don't know who the they is to begin with, but I don't think this sort of attack I don't think it was a high priority target for anyone who would do this sort of thing to hit a small liberal arts college in West Virginia, in the hills of West Virginia with like 3,000 people. It wasn't a thing that I was too worried about. But some people were. And that's my little story about September 11th of 2001. Sometime after that, I think it was probably the same day or just a few days after, I ended up drawing the drawing that is currently on the screen if you're watching the video version of this, that I'm redrawing and will use as the cover for this post. Now, we are on September 11th of 2021. What has changed? Right now, probably in that same classroom, there's some grown adults who may not have even been born when I was in that classroom back in 2001 that are now sitting in that classroom of that now changed to West Liberty State University campus. In the White House, in the Congress, in the Senate, in the government of the United States of America, we're told that the adults are back in charge as well. Now, when they say back in charge, that's because ostensibly, for the last 4 years under President Donald J. Trump, those weren't adults. But now it's back in charge. The adults are back in charge. So it's back like President Barack Obama's term, back to George Bush Jr.'s term, and he was the one who was president when these attacks happened back in September 11th of 2001. I recall I don't know when I first saw the video of when Bush was first told what had happened. He was in a classroom, he'd been reading something for the kids, and somebody came in and whispered something to his ear. He seemed to take a pause. I think he went back to reading, and then later on, I think on that same day, if I'm not mistaken, gave a live address to the nation. I recall people mocking him. I think I was one of those people mocking him, because back then I was just younger, and I was more politically left-leaning. I wasn't that politically engaged, but social-politically, that is the general ethos, is to be left-leaning, to be, we're against the authority, and things like that. So, whether you like George Bush or not, I recall him being mocked for that. But that was hearing about something happening on the day, and still, I think, going out there and actually giving an address to the people, and getting that shock, that sudden shock of what had actually happened on that occasion. And today, as I release this, you're probably going to hear a previously recorded, released video from one Joseph Robinette Biden, current President of the United States of America, that we are told these are the adults. This individual had how long to set up and get ready to actually speak in front of the people, and they can't even get out and do a live address. Now, the same students like me, late teens, early 20s, that would mock George Bush back then, do they mock Biden for the same kind of things? Does the media excoriate him for the same kind of things they excoriated George Bush for. I think you'll notice some of these things are different. Some of the worries that some of those students had back then, that I had back then, about what will the government do for us? How was the government protecting the people from what happened on that day? The worries that people have today in those colleges, in that same classroom, that they think the government will do this for me. How is the government actually going to do that for those people? The American government. Is the American government those people that I met? No, I was meeting just the regular people. What has changed? What has happened with the actual investigation of what happened on September 11th? Since then, the 20 years, what has come out? What's the information? You have this 20-year anniversary, and some of the survivors, some of the families of the survivors are saying, don't even show up unless you actually release, declassify the actual contents of what you know about what happened. And that's just being done now. What did they claim need to be done after that attack on September 11th? That attack happened. That's something we can all agree on. Then they say, okay, we can't tell you exactly why we know or what we know about this attack. We can't tell you about who we helped leave the country or who we knew was entering the country. These are things, this is classified material. But we know the attack happened. We know people are dead. Just like on the 27th of August, we know the attack happened at the airport. We know people are dead. But we can't tell you the full details. Or we'll tell you some certain details and later on they'll found not to be true. But that's neither here nor there. We can't tell you the actual stuff. National security. But this is what we need to do. We need to bomb this one target. We need to send a drone to bomb this target. And yeah, that's the threat. Oh, we find out that it's a family. Do we know it's a family? No, we don't know. But these are things that they know that we don't know. But the things that they did after, going to the Middle East, initiating these wars, going and taking down people, yes, actually, there hasn't been major attacks. And in part, I'm not quite sure exactly how, but there probably is a part of a reduction of some of these. There were some people who were intent on attacking the United States of America, that due to the United States of America and their allied forces going into the Middle East and killing some of these people, that reduced the chances of those people actually going out to the Middle East and coming to the West and other places and attacking people there. Agree or not with the military action, I think that's something that most reasonable people would say, yes, it's actually done some part. And then, of course, the main person that they said was responsible for this, Osama bin Laden, he was actually killed, somewhat connected to all of this. Yes, he happened to be in Pakistan. Yes, it happened to be in a place where I think the security agencies that are mostly funded by the United States of America, own intelligence agencies in different kind of ways, have different relationships, seem to maybe have possibly known who and where he was. He was really close to like their kind of CIA type of main Pentagonish type of location when they actually go in. But supposedly he was taken out when the current adult that is in the White House was the Vice President of the United States of America under President Barack Obama. But anyway, how did all this end? The pullout of American troops is announced by President Joseph Robinette Biden. Then the date comes, Kabul capitulates, people fall from planes, people stream to airports, reports are coming in of all sorts of chaos. The Taliban goes back in and retakes the nation. The president has been saying one thing, and then it turns out to be another. In the United States of America, in Afghanistan, the president says one thing and then just bails, and it's found out that there was a phone call between the American president and the Afghan president talking about, oh, we know it's not that good, but you have to actually put on a brave face and show a certain way so we can have certain confidence. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's kind of where we are right now on this day of the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. So is it over? Thank you for listening to this. This little presentation of mine is towards its end right now. And to answer that question of is it over, I think it depends. It depends on certain things. And I just thought of this scenario. I thought of doing this post while I was taking a walk yesterday, and I just did a sketch of this idea. It might seem incredible to you, but this sounds like something that I think could answer that question of is it over yet? Depends. So it's the 20th anniversary of September 11th attacks in the United States of America. And one of those Midwest students, you can call them Ian, that was not born in 2001 when I was in that classroom, is now sitting in that classroom. and they're just racking up debts. They might not be quite sure of the whole system, but they know, okay, we're on a scholarship and we got this, I got some FAFSA, I got some financial aid, I'm in school and I'm doing this kind of job, and yeah, I know this is the thing that I was told to do, and you get this job and then you're going to get money and then you're going to be big and successful, and you're seeing all these dreams and being told all these things. And right now in the country, he's facing a state-mandated shutdown and fiat currency stimulus inflated economy. And he's thinking, okay, now in order for me to pay back this debts or live this big life that I've been guaranteed, that finally I'm going to get out of that small town and get out there to a big city, and I'm going to just make these hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's how I'll be able to do this. That's how I'll be able to get that American dream of mine. And Ian works hard. On this day, he's watching the different reports coming in from the government and these presentations and these big parades and these big events and these declarations that yes, we finally got them out, and we've done this, and we're evacuating people, and we're doing these checks, and we're doing this, and we're putting these people in these other places. They've helped us in this and this and this and that. And it's going to take a couple of months in order to get all these people over there. We're still trying to get Americans out. The person's like, yes, I still have trust in my government. They're getting those Americans out. It might take them some time, but finally the war is over, and we're getting these Americans out. And yes, it was a little bad, but no, it was supposed to end this. And they just get on, they graduate, they end up going to that big city, they get that job, they're in there working, and then one day, years have passed, they're successfully living in some mid-sized city in the United States of America, and an explosion goes off. This ends Ian's life and dozens of other Americans. Now, in another mid-sized city in the United States of America, there's a woman who hears this news. Let's call her Amy. Now, Amy is late 30s, early 40s. She's online waiting for a phone call from her son, just the regular talks that they have. Now, Amy was a high school dropout from Steubenville, Ohio. She dropped out after she got pregnant and married her high school sweetheart, who also decided to not go to college and get a good job at some local factory. But she sees this name Ian and thinks, oh, I hear that news, and I think I knew somebody named Ian back in school, back when she was in West Liberty, back right now in 2021, in that same classroom that I was in 2001. She was there with Ian. And she looks into it and she wonders, why would somebody do this? Then it's found out, she looks into the news, and it turns out that this was actually an Afghan that actually came in during these last couple of months as the United States of America was getting people out, this initial drive of people. And this current plan that Joe Biden actually proposed of saying, okay, we need $4 billion to resettle the Afghan refugees. And this includes things like welfare, college placement, putting people in different positions, and taking care of these people because they helped us so much, and the chain migration comes in and all of that. And during this entire process, somebody came in from Afghanistan, and after all that time, they decided to do this. Why do they do this? Why would this make sense? It seems so senseless. Why would they do this? Oh, there's a manifesto. And in the manifesto and in the social media history, it turns out that this person had heard, oh yes, there's this white supremacy. White supremacists are keeping you down. They're going to destroy you. No matter what you try, no matter what you do, they're going to actually keep you down. Everything bad that has happened in the world, in the Middle East, is all the white man's fault. No matter what you do, yes, they've given you all this, but they're giving you all these things. They're not actually giving you the keys to the top. It's all the white man. And this person keeps hearing this, and this place is not my culture. It's not fitting to what I do. They're telling me I need to actually integrate and be part of these people, but then the people who actually live here are telling me this place is garbage, so why would I actually want to be part of this garbage? I'm not actually fitting in. And then eventually, at the end of the manifesto, they say that on that day that retaliation happened, that drone attack happened, taking that supposed threat out, one of the kids that died in that collateral damage was this person's little sister. So they thought, with all of this, not getting their place, getting their way in this American dream, not getting their piece of the American dream due to these white devil people, they were going to go to that office building, strap some explosives to themselves, and detonate. Now, this happens on the day that's the anniversary of the day this drone attack happened, on August 29th, some years in the future from today. So Amy's son finally calls in after she's had this realization, and she starts telling him about this. And her son is actually at a military base. He had recently enrolled in the American military. And Midwestern white males and Southern white males are most of the people who do join the military in the United States of America. Despite this whole recent adults in the room talking about, oh, we need to root out all the people, all these white supremacists, we need to go in and root them out of the military. Besides all that, these people still care for the military. They're still convinced that a lot of good can be done through the American military, even if they personally might not be completely like this. They say that doesn't fit me. I'm not a white supremacist. Yes, I don't mind my history. Yes, I don't mind my culture, but I know people from other places. I played sports with other people. I've seen what my mom has been through. We've been through this kind of environment. We've seen white people be bad to us. We've seen black people be bad to black people. So we're not really seeing this in that sense, despite what some people have been saying. So they joined the military. So Amy gets her son on the phone and starts talking to him and starts explaining that, yes, I actually knew Ian. He was this guy who was in my class back in 2021 when I was at West Liberty State University. And even though Amy and her son were somewhat close, really relied on each other, really talked to each other on a regular basis, she hadn't talked too much about her high school sweetheart, his father, her husband. At this time when she was back in college, this story of Ian kind of sparked it and she thought, okay, let me tell him more about this. And she explains that back in 2021, she had gone back to school because her husband, his father, her high school sweetheart, had recently committed suicide after being addicted to opioids, falling for the opioid crisis that's still going on in the United States of America. It turns out that he had got this job when they dropped out of school at this factory and they were working pretty well at it. But then, due to certain regulations and certain things with the government, the factory shut down and he wasn't able to just learn to code. But eventually he'd worked around, taken odd jobs here and there, struggled, and then he'd met someone and decided, okay, let's actually just go into and start a business on our own. And they ended up doing that. And it was getting up on its feet after a couple of years, and then the pandemic hit. It was shut down, they couldn't work anymore, and then he got addicted to opioids. He started getting worse and worse on that. And then eventually he committed suicide. She'd also had just a part-time job that she was just helping with some of the bills as the kid was in school and things like this. This kid was in his teens at this time. But at the office place she was in, they were also dealing with some issues in there. And due to certain regulations and mandates and starting to fit certain quotas, she happened to be an American white female. And many of the jobs that she qualified for had actually expressly declared that they're looking for non-white applicants. There's actually jobs right now that are actually applying and saying, don't apply if you're white. You can go check that. So she thought, okay, I was a high school dropout, I was still pretty decent, my family is still here, they still care for me, and the grandparents said, okay, we'll help you out. You just come back home, we'll help you out, and we'll take care of the young one, and you can go back and re-enroll in school. And she decides, like, okay, my husband might not have been able to do this, but I'll be able to learn how to code. And she goes back and she actually starts learning that. And yes, she's a little older than the rest of the students, but she has that drive, she has a goal, she puts her nose down to the grindstone, and ends up actually learning how to code, and now is a relatively successful middle-class American. Her son cuts in and says, okay, I'm sorry, Mom, really thanks for telling me the story, I want you to tell me more, but right now, we're actually being shipped out. This attack had not just been one out of the blue. Unfortunately, this seemed to be part of a string of attacks that had happened over the last couple of years. A few in Europe, a few thwarted in America, many more in the Middle East. But for some political reasons, the Americans and a few other allies had re-engaged in Afghanistan. They were back in that place. They were now fighting with different militants that were now in the rather chaotic Afghanistan. So they say their goodbyes, and he assures her that, okay, we're going back to Bagram Air Base. This is my first deployment there. I know I'm just going to be there for the first couple of days. It's not going to be that big of a thing. It's going to be routine type of things. And she says, okay, I'll be talking to you whenever I get there, whenever I talk to you, when I come back from the daily kind of routine things, we'll set the time and we'll actually have the calls, and he assures that. So ends up going, ships out to Afghanistan, lands at Bagram Base, for a couple of days has been doing the routine things. And then now it's September 11th. Amy's back, waiting for her son to come for their routine daily talks. But an hour before the time comes, she starts getting reports in the news that there's actually different kind of militants actually launching attacks in different places of Afghanistan. It turns out there was some kind of coordinated attacks. She thinks, okay, my son's going to be on, I'm going to be able to talk to him and say, okay, what's actually going on to these things? Because these things have been ramping up. And the time comes and the son doesn't show up. She starts getting concerned. The doorbell rings. She gets more worried. She goes and opens the door and sees two Marines standing there. Her mind is rushing. She's thinking, no, we can't let them in, I can't let them in, I can't let them in, I have to talk to my son, I have to talk to my son. Then she says, no, you focus. She looks up and says, I can't let you in, but just tell me now. The Marines look at each other. They look back at her, and one of them says, ma'am, last night your son was coming back from a routine patrol. He and his team were ambushed by some people that were in hiding, and he was shot dead while saving one of his friends. She stands there, just dumbfounded, just looking at them. They look at each other once again and look back at her and say, "Ma'am, he was one of our brothers. We in the American military, as the American military does, will do everything in their power to find the people who did this." She looks at them, thanks them, nods, takes a step back, closes the door, and as they walk away, she breaks down crying. Some days later, her son is back in the United States of America in a dignified transfer. Her grandparents are there with her, some family, some friends. Take him to the burial place, bury him, come back home, and she sees an alert on her internet search engine. She put an alert up to see what's happening in Afghanistan, see if there's any news about her son. Turns out that there is some news. The military has found the people who actually were involved in the raid that ended up killing her son. Most of them were killed, but a few of them were captured. One of them captured was identified to have been the person who did shoot her son. Turns out that that individual had been trained by the US military when the military was there. He was a sniper. And it also turns out that part of why they were able to do this and infiltrate to the base is they were able to operate at night. In the past, that wasn't a thing. The United States of America owned the night. The Allied forces owned the night. But something was different. Turns out that part of the billions of military equipment that was left in Afghanistan that was acquired by various forces, including the Taliban, after that 2021 pullout, included some equipment that had parts that were in the factory that shut down, that led her husband to actually lose his job, go into that cycle, end up getting addicted to opiates. And that factory made parts that were included in night vision goggles. But again, why? Why would this person do this? The United States of America had been in there for 20 years, trying to help, trying to educate them, trying to free the Afghans. Why would he do this? Why would he have seen what the Americans did, how life was under the Americans, and then see what it's been in the last couple of years under the Taliban, and still want to kill American soldiers? Why would he want to do that? Turns out that this sniper answered that. He said that yes, he had been part of the military, yes. He had seen the positive things that the Americans had done. He'd even had a younger brother who was not only saved from having to join the tribal warlords, but due to him actually getting a salary in the military, he also did not have to join the military. He didn't have to be a combatant. He could just be a scholar, a student, a child. He could just learn. He could live his life in a freer kind of sense. Because even in the military, like this individual had joined, he'd seen some of the Afghans. He'd seen some of the people who had actually joined, some of the people the military is working with and what they actually did to little boys. That was a known thing. It's a known thing in that culture, and his brother was able to avoid that. So his brother was thankful to the United States of America. And on that day of the pullout, he thought that, oh yeah, my brother had been working with them, so I know I'm going to also get to go to America. So when the Americans decided to pull out and the Taliban started encroaching onto Kabul, his brother and a couple of friends made it into the Kabul airport. And unfortunately, he was one of those unnamed men that plunged hundreds of thousands of feet to their death from that C-17 that took off. So is it over? I don't know. I don't think so. From what I know historically, it seems like history shall continue to rhyme. Some of these mistakes will keep getting made, but I don't think it's as bad as it's been in the past. As I mentioned before, that yes, those planes flew into 2 buildings. It could have been worse even on that day. The Pentagon was hit. It could have been worse even on that day. That plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, it could have been worse even on that day. And then things could have been worse over the last 20 years. Things could have been worse in this pullout, but things were bad nonetheless. And I think steps can be taken, and I'm rather confident that they will be taken over these next couple of years to not get to this thought thing that I just came up with in my mind about 10, 5, 15 years away from now, I don't think it will be repeated in that same sense. And part of that is because we have information. We have the ability to actually know these. Problems occur not due to what X is, because of how we define X. I go to this university expecting racism, and I get there and I'm like, oh no, there's no actual racism. Somebody comes to me and expects, oh, this is an American, and they ask me certain things. But I'm not American at this time. But due talking, due to the conversations that we can understand each other. The United States of America has had issues in the past, have done things wrong. But are the politicians actually the American people? Is the Taliban leadership actually the average Afghan? Is the average American actually the politicians? No, these are different people. The thing is, these are a small amount of people who hold issues based on things that happen in their lives for their own benefits and then subject other people to those things. We don't have to keep living this way. We can get past those. We can start talking to each other. We can start communicating to each other. We can start understanding that some things are better than other things. If you don't actually even accept that and say that, no, we can actually be proud of who we are. We can actually be proud and say, we are actually going to live our best life. And we're actually going to value and understand how exceptional it is to be in a place like the United States of America. Because still today, as I mentioned, I'm posting this on September 11th of 2021. Think about where you are and think, would you rather be living in that same place that you are now, back on September 10th of 2001? Now think again. Would you rather be living at that place than you are now, back in September 11th of 2001, after hearing about these attacks? How bad did you think the world was going to be after you heard about that? Let's say you were alive at that time. How bad did you think it was going to be? Did it become that bad? Right now, if you're hearing this sometime after September 11th of 2021, how bad has the situation in Afghanistan been? What has been the reaction of the United States of America and other countries? How much did you do, or how much did you think was going to change? Did you play a part? Could you have said something? Could you have talked to somebody? Could you have bridged some gaps somewhere to improve the situation that happened? And I think most of you will find that, yeah, there's probably things you could have done personally to improve your personal life, and that might have actually had effects on the greater life, on the other people out there in the world. Because we're all human beings. We're human beings acting in certain ways. And the world isn't as bad as it might seem right now because of some all-powerful being or some all-powerful uber-humans that are out there doing things that you personally can't do. No, it's a few people making certain decisions that lead to other things, that lead to greater things. But you can also be that single person doing that one decision that has a knock-on effect to other positive things, to affect not only your life, but just the life for a lot of other people in the world in a positive way. So I think that's a good thing to think of. That's something that keeps me going. I hope I've done more. After I've released this video, I'm going to try to do my part in kind of bridging this understanding and trying to communicate things that I consider to be valuable. These concepts of liberty and not lasting and not just believing on these traditional older ideologies that keep bringing this blood libel, this tribal, this backwards base kind of instinct thing where we're just taking people down based on beliefs that we don't necessarily hold and holding other people responsible for things that they didn't personally do because you're grouping them and collectivizing them into these things. And we're better than this. We've seen how much worse we've been in the past. We can think of ways of how much worse it could be today. And it's up to us as individuals to be those people, to be those better people and prevent those worse outcomes from coming. So I hope you can do more in your life. I hope you can appreciate some of the things in your life. And I hope if you have some bad things going on in your life, that you can reach out and find some people who will be able to help you and find ways that you'll be able to help yourself as well. That's it for now. Till next time, thank you very much for listening and or watching. Till next time, goodbye.